First of all, location, location, location. In international trade, savvy managers' job number one is to leverage comparative advantage of world class locations. For example, one crucial reason behind China's rise as the world's top exporting nation is that many non Chinese managers at non Chinese firms have discovered China's comparative advantage as a low cost production location. As a result, they set up factories and export from China. Two-thirds of Chinese exports are generated by such foreign invested firms. Second, comparative advantage is not fixed. Managers need to constantly monitor and nurture the current comparative advantage of a location and take advantage of new promising locations. Managers who fail to realize the departure of comparative advantage from certain locations are likely to fall behind. For example, numerous German managers have moved productions elsewhere, citing Germany's relatively reduced comparative advantage in basic manufacturing. However, they still concentrate top notch, high end manufacturing in Germany, leveraging its excellence in engineering. Third, managers need to be politically active if they appreciate the gains from trade. In times of economic difficulties, governments are often under pressure to adopt protectionist policies. While managers at many uncompetitive firms have long mastered the game of twisting politicians' arm for more protection, managers at competitive firms, who tend to be pro free trade, have a tendency to shy away from politics. They often fail to realize that free trade is not free. It requires constant efforts and sacrifices to demonstrate, safeguard, and advance the gains from such trade. For example, the U.S. China Business Council, a pro free trade, in particular pro China trade, group consisting of 250 large U.S. firms that are active in China, like Coca Cola and GE, has stood up and spoken out against various what we call China bashers. Now we take a look at In Focus 5.2, Britain's new industrial revolution. Making stuff has dwindled from nearly 40% of Britain's GDP in the late 50s to not much more than 10% now. What remains survives for a reason. General Motors' Luton factory this year will produce 70,000 Valhall Vivaro vans and other vehicles, more than 60% for export. Prime Minister David Cameron has latched on to manufacturing as a cure for Britain's economic hangover and its 7.9 jobless rate. If you're trying to make the economy grow long term on a sustainable basis, manufacturing is where we need to be, says Vince Cable, UK Business Secretary. One of the main growth sectors of the economy in recent years has been banking. For reasons that are blindingly obvious, that's not going to be so important in the future. Starting a new industrial revolution will be hard. Government efforts to cut red tape produced plenty of their own. If you were to write on a board how many agencies and support schemes there are, you would be amazed, said Bill Parfitt, GM UK's chairman. Economists and some manufacturing executives also say that boosting manufacturing may be unwise. British manufacturing as a share of GDP is smaller than Germany's 20%. Yet it is similar to the US and France, which have big service sectors. Britain may have reached an equilibrium between the two sectors. I don't think any economists believe that growth in the next 5 to 20 years will be driven by manufacturing, says Jonathan Portes, director of the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. We have reached the chapter summary of Chapter 5. In Section 1, we use the resource-based and institution-based views to answer why nations trade. We talked about the resource-based view, suggesting that nations trade because some firms in one nation generate valuable, unique, and hard to imitate exports that firms in other nations find it beneficial to import. We talked about the institution-based views that argues that as the rules of the game, different laws and regulations governing international trade aim to share gains from trade. In Section 2, which was about understanding classical and modern theories of international trade, We talked about briefly classical theories, which are mercantilism, absolute advantage, and comparative advantage. And we discussed modern theories, product life cycles, strategic trade, and diamond. In section 3, we realized the importance of political realities governing international trade. Key ideas are the net impact of various tariffs and NTBs is that the whole nation is worse off, while certain special interest groups benefits. Economic arguments against free trade center around protectionism and infant industries. Political arguments against free trade focus on national security, consumer protection, foreign policy, and environmental and social responsibility. In section 4, we participated in 2 leading debates concerning international trade. The first argument is trade deficit versus trade surplus, and the second one is classical theories versus new realities. Section 5 draws on an implication for action to be acutely and accurately aware of the comparative advantage of certain locations and to leverage their potential. Good managers learn to monitor and nurture the current comparative advantage and take advantage of new locations, and they are politically active to demonstrate, safeguard, and advance the gains of international trade. After this follows a review of each of the key terms, which we can briefly take a look at here in the blue. And we also talked about some of the definitions and where they are located. This marks the end of chapter 5.